The key was still in my apartment door when I froze, heart slamming against my ribs. There, sprawled across my couch like she owned the place, was my sister Madison, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. And just like that, I knew my life was about to implode. But this isn't just another story about entitled family members. This is about the moment I finally learned that my worth wasn't measured by how much I gave away of myself. My name is Olivia. I'm 34, and 3 years ago I did something that felt impossible. I bought my own apartment. No family money. No help from anyone. Just me, my tax salary, and a mortgage that still makes my stomach drop every month. But it was mine. Every scuffed wall. Every creaky floorboard. Every dollar of crushing debt. Mine. I still remember standing alone in the empty living room that first day, keys clutched in my trembling hand. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I'd pressed my palm against the wall, feeling the slight texture beneath my fingertips, and whispered, "I did this." 3 simple words that carried the weight of countless overtime hours, years of careful saving, and a lifetime of being told I needed to do more for everyone else. That's why, when an email landed in my inbox offering me a position at our European branch for 2 years, my first thought wasn't excitement. It was panic. What do you do with an apartment when you're gone for 730 days? You can't just let it sit collecting dust while that mortgage payment drains your account every month. The answer seemed obvious: rent it out. Use that income to cover my payments while building my career overseas. Simple, right? I called Martin, the lawyer who'd helped me navigate the purchase. His voice carried that casual confidence I desperately needed. "Martin, I need your brain for a minute. I'm heading to Europe for work, 2 years. Want to rent out my place. How do I do this without the tax people deciding I owe them my firstborn?" He laughed, which was reassuring. "Smart thinking, Olivia. You'll need a proper lease agreement. I can draft that for you. You'll report the rental income, but it's straightforward. Just keep every receipt that exists." That conversation got me thinking about the condition of my place. It wasn't bad, but it could definitely use some TLC if I wanted to attract quality tenants. So I hired contractors, 3 guys recommended by a friend. Kyle, the lead guy, walked through my apartment with the kind of critical eye that made me both nervous and hopeful. "Kitchen needs fresh paint, bathroom could use some tile work, and these living room walls have seen better days," he said, running his hand along a particularly stubborn scuff mark. "Nothing major, but if you want it looking magazine ready, we're talking 2 weeks, tops. But here's the thing, you can't stay here while we work. Too much dust, too much noise." I called Emily, my friend who's basically my chosen sister after 15 years of friendship. She's got this gorgeous house across town with a guest room that's seen me through breakups, job stress, and now apartment renovations. "Emily, can I crash at your place for a couple weeks? Getting some work done." "Of course. When have you ever even had to ask?" Her voice carried that immediate warmth that reminded me why we'd been friends since college. So I packed my life into a couple suitcases and moved into Emily's guest room while Kyle and his crew transformed my apartment. The noise was incredible, even driving by to check on progress made my ears ring. But what was really eating at me wasn't the construction noise. It was the conversation I kept avoiding with my parents. Here's the thing about my family, they have opinions about everything I do, whether I ask for them or not. My parents are the kind of people who think suggestion and demand mean the same thing. And Madison, she's 26, 8 years younger than me, and has perfected the art of being taken care of by everyone else. Madison still lives with my parents, which honestly doesn't surprise me. They've been treating her like delicate china since she was born. She's been dating Tyler for about 6 months. He seems okay, I guess, but steady employment isn't exactly his strong suit. Neither is it Madison's, for that matter. She went to college, but guess who paid for most of it when my parents suddenly couldn't afford it? That would be me, the responsible older sister with the steady job and the apparent obligation to fund everyone else's dreams. I've lost count of how many times I've drained my savings to help my family through temporary financial difficulties that somehow never improved. I knew I had to tell them about Europe eventually. I just kept putting it off because I knew exactly how it would go. They'd have opinions, they'd have expectations, and somehow my good news would become about how I could make everyone else's life easier. 2 weeks before my departure date, I finally worked up the nerve. I called my mom with that particular brand of dread that comes with family obligations. "Hi, Mom. Can I come over for dinner tonight? I have some news to share." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll make your favorite. Madison and Tyler will be here too." Her voice carried that sing-song quality that always seemed to hide something else underneath. I showed up at 6 with a bottle of wine, hoping alcohol might smooth whatever rough edges were coming. My parents live in this nice house they bought when I was in high school, bigger than my place, definitely more comfortable. I ran my hand along the familiar banister as I stepped inside, the smell of my mom's cooking filling the air with spices and memory. We settled around the dinner table with Mom's grilled steak, which was admittedly pretty good. Madison was there with Tyler, and she spent most of dinner staring at her phone like the rest of us were just background noise. Typical Madison behavior, present in body, absent in every way that actually mattered. "So," Mom said, leaning forward with that eager expression she gets when she senses drama coming, "what's this news you wanted to share?" I took a breath that felt like it might be my last peaceful one for a while. The company offered me a position in Europe. I'll be gone for 2 years, working at our branch there. My parents exchanged one of those looks, the kind married couples perfect over decades, where entire conversations happen without words. Dad smiled first. "That sounds wonderful, honey. We're proud of you." The words should have warmed me, but they felt hollow somehow. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Madison rolling her eyes like I just announced I was joining the circus. She always did that when I talked about work, like career success was somehow boring or irrelevant. "Thanks, but there's one more thing," I continued, feeling the temperature in the room start to shift. "I'm planning to rent out my apartment while I'm gone. I mean, I can't just let it sit empty for 2 years. I still have mortgage payments to make." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom and Dad exchanged another look, and this time I knew exactly what it meant. They were calculating, strategizing, figuring out how my situation could solve their problems. "Actually," Mom said slowly, like she was delivering wisdom from on high, "you don't need to rent it out to strangers. Madison and Tyler could stay there. That way you know it's in good hands, and you don't have to worry about tenants trashing the place." I blinked hard, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me? Your sister needs her own space," Mom continued, warming to her theme. "And Tyler too. They're planning to get married soon." I looked at Madison, who was suddenly very interested in the conversation now that it involved getting something for free. Tyler was smiling like someone had just told him he'd won the lottery. "Okay," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice level. "If they want to rent it from me, I'm open to that. I'd even give them a family discount, 20% off what I was planning to charge." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on the entire room. Mom's face went from white to red so fast I thought she might be having some kind of medical emergency. "Are you serious right now?" she said, her voice climbing an octave. "You want to charge your own sister rent?" I stared at her, genuinely confused by her outrage. "Mom, I have a mortgage to pay. The whole point of renting the place out is to cover those payments while I'm gone." "But she's family," Mom shot back, her voice getting louder with each word. That's when Madison finally decided to join the conversation. "God, Olivia, you're so greedy. I can't believe you won't just let me live there." Something hot and sharp flared in my chest. "I do help family," I said, my own voice rising. "Who paid for Madison's college when you guys said you couldn't afford it? Who lends you money whenever you ask for it?" Dad cleared his throat like he was about to deliver some profound wisdom. "That's different, honey." "How is it different?" Madison leaned forward, her eyes bright with self-righteous anger. "Because you make way more money than we do. You can afford to let me live there for free." I felt my blood pressure spiking, that familiar sensation of being the responsible one who's expected to sacrifice for everyone else's comfort. "Madison, I make more money because I work my ass off, and I still have bills to pay." "We need that money for Madison's wedding," Dad interjected, like that somehow trumped my mortgage payments. I stared at him. and I need income to pay my mortgage. How is my situation any different from yours? Madison slammed her hand on the table with enough force to make the glasses jump. Because we're your family. And besides, I don't want to live in mom and dad's rental apartment. It's in a terrible neighborhood. Your place is downtown, near everything. The audacity was breathtaking. So you want the better apartment, but you don't want to pay for it? God, you're such a bitch, Madison spat. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice carrying that particular brand of entitlement that comes from never having to work for anything. Come on, Olivia. We wouldn't trash the place or anything. We'd take good care of it. I'm sure you would, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. But I'm not running a charity here. The room went completely silent. The kind of silence that feels like a held breath, like everyone's waiting for someone else to break first. Mom's voice, when she finally spoke, was ice cold. I think you should leave. Fine by me. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody walked me out. Nobody tried to stop me or apologize or suggest we talk through this like rational adults. I just left. The drive back to Emily's house was a blur. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I couldn't tell if it was from anger or hurt or just the sheer disbelief of what had just happened. How dare they act like I owed them something? Like I was being unreasonable for wanting to be paid for the use of my own apartment? Emily was in the kitchen when I walked in, took one look at my face, and immediately went into best friend crisis mode. Oh honey, what happened? I told her everything. Every word of the conversation, every accusation, every moment of that dinner from hell. Emily listened without interrupting, her expression growing more and more incredulous. Olivia, honey, I hate to say this, but they've always favored Madison. Even when we were in high school, it was obvious. Madison gets away with everything, and you're expected to be the responsible one who cleans up everyone else's messes. I sat down at her kitchen table and put my head in my hands. I know you're right, but it still hurts. Emily made us both tea, the steam rising between us like a fragile barrier against the world. She reminded me of all the times over the years when my parents had treated me like the family ATM, expecting me to solve their financial problems while never acknowledging the sacrifice it required. You're doing the right thing, she said firmly. Don't let them guilt you into changing your mind. I won't. But God, this really hurts. The next 3 days were eerily quiet. No phone calls from my parents, no texts from Madison, nothing. Part of me was relieved, but part of me was also hurt. Like, they couldn't even try to understand my position or apologize for how they treated me. On the 4th day, I drove over to check on the renovation work. Kyle and his crew had finished, and honestly, the place looked incredible. Fresh paint everywhere, new fixtures in the bathroom, even updated cabinet hardware in the kitchen. They'd done an amazing job. After they left, I sat in my empty, beautiful apartment and looked through the rental applications I'd received online. There were quite a few, but one couple really stood out, Nicholas and Abigail Whitman. Both had excellent jobs, perfect credit scores, and glowing references from previous landlords. They seemed like exactly the kind of tenants every landlord dreams about. I called them that afternoon. Hi, is this Abigail? This is Olivia, about the apartment rental. Would you like to see the place? I could meet you there day after tomorrow around 2. That would be perfect. We're very interested. Wonderful. I'll text you the address. 2 days later, I drove over to meet them. I arrived a few minutes early and waited outside the building, feeling optimistic for the first time in weeks. They showed up right on time, a nice-looking couple in their early 30s, both dressed professionally and clearly excited about the possibility. We walked into the building together, and I found myself chatting with them about the neighborhood, pointing out the grocery store around the corner and the great restaurant 2 blocks away. It sounds like a wonderful area, Nicholas said. It really is. I've loved living here. We took the elevator up to the 4th floor, and I was telling them about the building's amenities when we reached my door. I pulled out my key, feeling confident about how the showing was going to go. Okay, here we are, I said, unlocking the door and pushing it open. I stepped inside with Nicholas and Abigail right behind me, and that's when my world tilted sideways. Madison was sitting on my couch in sweatpants and a ratty t-shirt, looking for all the world like she belonged there. Tyler was in my kitchen making himself a sandwich like he was the king of his own castle. There were suitcases stacked in the corner by the window, and Madison's clothes were draped over my armchair like she'd been living there for weeks. I felt like someone had punched me directly in the stomach. "What the hell?" I said, my voice coming out strangled. Nicholas and Abigail were standing behind me in the doorway, clearly confused and uncomfortable. Madison looked up from the couch with that particular brand of casual indifference she'd perfected over the years. "Oh, hey Olivia. You should have knocked." "Knocked? This is my apartment." Tyler turned around from the kitchen counter, still holding his sandwich, and had the audacity to smile at Nicholas and Abigail like this was completely normal. "Hey there," he said cheerfully. Nicholas and Abigail looked at each other, then at me. The discomfort radiating off them was almost palpable. Abigail said quietly, "Is this a bad time?" "No, it's not a bad time," I said, my voice getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. "These people are not supposed to be here." Madison stood up, stretching like she was waking up from a pleasant nap. "Actually, we are. Mom gave us the key yesterday. We're going to be living here while you're gone." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what she just said. "She what? The spare key you gave her when you bought this place?" "She gave it to us yesterday. We moved in last night." My hands started shaking. Abigail touched my arm gently. "Maybe we should come back another time," she said softly. "No, wait," I said, but I could already see it in their faces. They were done. This was too weird, too uncomfortable, too much drama for a simple apartment viewing. "We'll call you," Nicholas said, but his tone made it clear they absolutely would not be calling me. They left, and I heard their footsteps disappearing down the hallway, taking my perfect tenants and my rental income with them. I turned back to Madison and Tyler, who were both looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Get out," I said. "We're not going anywhere," Madison replied with that stubborn set to her jaw I remembered from childhood tantrums. "Mom said we could stay here." Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and don't worry about utilities or anything. We figured you could keep paying those yourself." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. I pulled out my phone with hands that were still trembling from anger and dialed my mother's number. Madison and Tyler watched me from across the room like this was entertainment. Mom answered on the third ring. "Did you really give Madison the key to my apartment?" I asked without bothering with pleasantries. Mom's voice immediately took on that defensive tone she used when she knew she was wrong but didn't want to admit it. "Madison needs a place to stay, and you're being selfish about this whole thing. I thought if they just moved in, you'd see how silly you're being." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, this is breaking and entering. They don't have permission to be here. Don't be dramatic. They're family. I don't care if they're the Pope. This is my apartment, and I didn't say they could live here." I told her about Nicholas and Abigail, how they'd left because of this mess, how embarrassing and unprofessional it had been. Mom just kept insisting I was overreacting and being greedy. I hung up on her. Behind me, Madison was actually laughing. "You should have seen your face when you walked in here," she said to Tyler. "It was priceless." That was it. That was the moment something inside me finally snapped into place. I walked out of the apartment without saying another word to either of them. I sat in my car in the parking lot and dialed 911. "I need to report a break-in," I told the dispatcher. "There are people in my apartment who don't have permission to be there." The dispatcher asked for my address and said they'd send officers over. I told them I'd meet them in the lobby. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived, Officer Franklin and Officer Wallace. I explained the entire situation as we rode the elevator up, how I was leaving for Europe, how my family had demanded I let my sister live there for free, how my mother had given them my spare key without permission. We reached my door, and I unlocked it with my key. Madison and Tyler were still there, but now they looked nervous seeing the uniforms. "What's going on?" Madison asked, her voice not nearly as confident as before. Officer Franklin stepped forward professionally. We need to see some identification from both of you. They handed over their licenses, and Officer Franklin examined them carefully. Ma'am, he said to me, can you confirm that you didn't give these individuals permission to be in this apartment? That's correct. I did not give them permission. Officer Wallace turned to Madison and Tyler. Do you have any documentation showing you have the right to be here? A lease agreement? Anything like that? Madison looked panicked now. Our mom gave us the key. She has a spare. The owner of the apartment is standing right here, Officer Franklin said calmly, and she's telling us you don't have permission to be here. You need to gather your belongings and leave within the next hour. That's when Madison completely lost it. She started screaming at me, calling me names I won't repeat here. She said I was ruining her life, that I was a terrible sister, that I'd always been jealous of her. The words poured out of her like poison she'd been storing up for years. Then she tried to come at me. Officer Wallace grabbed her arm before she could reach me, but Tyler made everything worse. When he saw the officer restraining Madison, he shoved Officer Wallace hard. Get your hands off her. That was the biggest mistake he could have made. Both officers immediately moved to restrain Tyler, and within seconds he was on the floor in handcuffs. Madison was screaming even louder now, and when she tried to kick Officer Franklin, she ended up in handcuffs too. You're both under arrest, Officer Franklin said calmly. Trespassing and assault on a police officer. They read them their rights while I just stood there watching my sister and her boyfriend being arrested in my own apartment. Madison was still yelling as they walked her down the hall, but now she was crying too, ugly, desperate sobs that might have broken my heart if I hadn't been so angry. After they left, I sat down on my couch in the sudden, blessed silence. The apartment was quiet, but evidence of their brief occupation was everywhere, their clothes, their suitcases, food in the kitchen that wasn't mine. I spent the next 2 hours packing all their belongings back into their suitcases. I wasn't gentle about it, I just shoved everything in and zipped the bags shut. Then I called a courier service and had them deliver everything to my parents' house. I didn't want to deal with that confrontation myself. While I was waiting for the courier, I called a locksmith the building super had recommended when I first moved in. Hey, it's Olivia from apartment 4B. I need my locks changed today, like, right now if possible. He said he could be there in an hour, and true to his word, he showed up with his tools and had completely new locks installed in 30 minutes. I now had entirely new keys, and my parents' spare key was absolutely useless. The whole time he was working, my phone kept ringing. My parents calling over and over. I didn't answer. Then the text started, message after message from my mother. I was a terrible daughter. I was selfish. I was destroying the family. I was a monster for having my own sister arrested. I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning, Officer Franklin called me back. We wanted to let you know that your sister and her boyfriend spent the night in jail. They're asking if you want to press charges. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to press charges, but they were still family, even if they were acting like complete idiots. No, I don't want to press charges for the trespassing. But what Tyler did to your officer, that's up to you guys. He'll probably get a fine and community service. Maybe some anger management classes. Not my problem, I said, and I meant it. I realized I was running out of time to find tenants on my own. I only had about a week left before I had to leave for Europe, and I'd already lost Nicholas and Abigail because of this disaster. So I called my friend Dominic, who's a real estate agent. Dominic, I need help. I'm leaving for Europe in a week, and I need to get my apartment rented fast. Can you help me out? Of course. Send me photos of the place and I'll get it listed properly. I'll handle the showings and everything. You just focus on getting ready for your trip. That was exactly what I needed to hear. I spent the rest of the day photographing the apartment and sending Dominic all the details about rent and lease terms. 3 days later, I flew out to Europe. 2 weeks after that, Dominic called to tell me he'd found perfect tenants and the lease was signed. Living in Europe turned out to be incredible. The work was challenging, the city was beautiful, and I was making excellent money. Best of all, I was getting rental payments from my apartment every month that covered my mortgage perfectly. Dominic had found this wonderful couple, both doctors, who took exceptional care of the place and never caused a single problem. For the first month after I left, my phone was blissfully quiet. No calls from my parents, no angry texts from Madison. It was like they'd just written me off completely, and honestly, I was fine with that. The peace was incredible. Then my Aunt Vivian called. She's my dad's sister and has always been the most reasonable person in our entire family. "Olivia, honey, how are you settling in over there? Listen, I wanted to tell you about Madison's wedding situation." Vivian told me that Tyler's parents had found out about what happened at my apartment. Apparently, they'd had to bail Tyler out of jail after he was arrested, and when they asked him what happened, he told them the whole story. "They were horrified," Vivian said. "Absolutely horrified. They called your parents and told them they were disgusted by the whole thing. They also said they thought Madison was spoiled and entitled." Vivian explained that Tyler's parents had been planning to pay for a significant portion of the wedding. They'd already put down deposits on the venue and catering, but after the apartment incident, they pulled all their financial support. They told Tyler and Madison that if they wanted to get married, they'd have to pay for it themselves. They said they weren't going to reward that kind of behavior. "Wow," I said. "It gets better, doesn't it?" "Oh, it does. Madison went to your mother and begged her to let them live in that rental apartment your parents own. Your mother said no." I couldn't help but laugh. So Mom suddenly understands the concept of needing rental income. Exactly. Madison threw a huge fit about it, started screaming that it wasn't fair, that your parents were being just as greedy as you were. She said that, and your mother didn't like that one bit. 6 months into my European assignment, I was thriving. My apartment was generating steady rental income, my mortgage was being paid on time, and I was building up substantial savings with my overseas salary. The work was fascinating, and I'd made incredible friends among my international colleagues. I hadn't heard from my parents or Madison in months, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Vivian still called every few weeks to check on me and give me updates, though I'd stopped asking for them. I didn't really care what was happening with Madison and Tyler anymore. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. "I'm proud of you for standing your ground," Vivian said during one of our calls. "Your parents always expected you to be the responsible one who fixed everyone else's problems. It was time someone said no. I just got tired of being taken advantage of. As you should have. You worked hard for what you have. Nobody has the right to just take it from you, family or not." Now, as I sit in my European apartment looking out at the city lights, I don't feel guilty at all. I made the right choice. My apartment is being beautifully cared for, my bills are being paid, and I'm living my life on my own terms. Sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who actually respect and support you. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from people who only see you as a source of money or favors, even when those people share your DNA. The most important lesson I learned? Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. And sometimes it takes losing everything you thought mattered to discover what actually does. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, share it with others, and don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when family lets you down. Remember, the people who get angry when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none.